Can you feel it? 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 Can you feel? Can you feel it? 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 Can you feel? Can you feel it?
Hello, friends. Welcome to Forsa, the podcast that dives in to explore the nature and experience of being alive. I'm your host, Tracy Breathnach, performance artist, writer, researcher, mother, lover, all-round deep diver into embodied experience. What does it feel like to be alive? How can I describe it and communicate it? How can we learn from each other's experiences of aliveness? In the series, I talk with a wide variety of guests, artists, activists, educators, spiritual teachers, writers, guides, shamans, to find out more about their experiences of the force, life force, energy of life, elixir of life, source, whatever we might call it. I hope it brings something new to your experience of being alive.
Can you feel it? 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 Can you feel it?
A warm welcome to my guest today, Lynn Sedgemore, or her official title, Dr. Lynn Sedgemore, CBE. Lynn spent her full-time professional career of 36 years teaching and leading in the UK further education sector. She was awarded a CBE in 2004. She was named one of Debrett's 500 most influential people in the UK in 2015, and one of the UK's 100 Women of Spirit in 2016. Her organisations have won numerous national and international awards, including the International Spirit at Work Award. Lynn has been a non-executive director on over 25 boards. She works as a coach, a leadership developer, consultant, retreat leader, healer, poetess, priestess, and she is a mother and a grandmother. She's also the founder and tutor of the Goddess Luminary Wheel teachings, which began in 2019. Her master's and doctoral degrees specialize in spiritual leadership and co-creating spirited organizations. She's published 3 collections of poetry, and she lives in Glastonbury. She's been there since 1989, and it's in Glastonbury where I first met her a few years ago at the Goddess Conference, when I was co-facilitating a workshop with my friend Lucy Pierce on Browning Woman, and Lynn was a participant there. And everything about her work just enlivens me when I hear all of the things she's done. And I hope her chat with me now will also inspire and enliven you. Thanks for joining me, Lynn. I'm already noticing in my body how excited I am. A lot of excitement, a lot of heat, and there are so many things about the work that you do that I feel mirrored in myself, and the weaving between the different worlds, both in the professional and the spiritual, that really excites me, because I find this so rarely in certainly my professional world within education or the university or something like that. And when I find it, it's always women who seem to bring this together. Um, so I wonder if maybe we start with your work that you mentioned on your PhD, on your professional doctorate, and how things came about, really, where you have these different parts of your life and you bring them together through this piece of work. What that process was for you, and what emerged for you through that bringing together of something.
Okay, great to be here, Tracy. Thanks for inviting me. Now, how long have you got? I've always been a spiritual seeker, and I come from Welsh mining, working class family, very grounded, very earthed, very practical. And I have always wanted to be a teacher and to do well. So that mix of things is really what I brought together in my professional doctorate, which is a bit like writing an autobiography, only with literature reviews and scholarly academic requirements that you wouldn't have in an autobiography. In 1989, I had an incredible mystical experience, which kind of blew me away, really, in terms of it was a build up. So I went beyond myself and very, very deep enlivenment, mystical experience. And I'd just been appointed the dean of a business school. So I came back from a month away on retreat in Greece to head up a business school. I was in my mid-30s and very nervous about this job. So what became an imperative for me was how do I now bring together those different parts of myself into an integrated whole. So I experimented as a dean of a business school in bringing in love and values and service into the business school. The marketeers and the HR people loved it. The accountants and the bankers thought this woman is bonkers and off her trolley. But eventually we co-created a really collective, high-spirited community. And I went on then, I was then later principal of Guildford College, chief exec of the Centre for Excellence in Leadership. And in each of those spaces, I played with integrating my spirituality and my professional life. And I've always had high standards. And a part of me was wanting to prove that you can be spiritual and you can be grounded and rooted and successful in mainstream life as well, and how they complement each other. And I started to work with two professors, Dr. Jodie Fry from Texas and they're both professors, Professor Jochen Altman, who's in England, to look at spirituality in the workplace. So that became a really integrating, fascinating study for me. And the reason I got my doc prof out of that was because within further education, I had contributed in a new way to how do you create high-spirited but also high-performing organizations.
I like hearing the use of spirited spirituality, spirited, and we use them in different ways in our kind of day-to-day language. And if we describe someone as being spirited, we may not necessarily be even considering our spirit. And for me, one of the things that I find remarkable is really the word spirituality. I find a resistance in myself to using it because I feel it often becomes dissociated from my body. That spirituality is something over there, up there, out there, and that is almost not even part of me. So our spirituality is like, well, what is our spirit? What is my spirituality? Is my spirit? That's me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's not separate from me. And so that's something I find, I suppose, with these kind of different ways of languaging in these different places. How do we relate to others who maybe have a different experience or a different way of describing the experience? And how did you find that sort
Uh,
of playing out?
Do you know what? That's an absolute fascinating inquiry at the core of my soul. That what you've just said.
Okay.
What I'm interested in my own spiritual journey, obviously, but I am equally as fascinated of how do other people come to, and you can call it what you like for me, come to wholeness, find their spirit, feel their soulfulness. It really doesn't matter to me. I'm not prescriptive. I'm multi-faith, interfaith, pluralism, call it what you like. I'm deeply expansive and curious by it all. Yeah. And I'm a mystic, I suppose. So a mystic isn't constrained by any doctrines or dogma. It's about direct experience of something that I feel is my spirit, my soul, my true nature, whatever. So you'll find me using all different sorts of words. I think what you're referring to there is some of us experience a sense of something more or whatever, or spirit, or source, as embodied. Immanence is a theological word. It's an immanent thing. It's within us. It's from within us. We are part of it. We're part of the whole universe. So that's a kind of immanent perspective, or a pantheistic perspective. I happen to have a really strong, I was like really religious, not pious, but really religious. Couldn't wait to go to church. Was in the Salvation Army, was a Mormon when I was a teenager, explored everything. Then went to Buddhism. So I've got a religious sensibility, but it's wrapped in a spiritual sensibility, because in my doctorate, I went into what's the difference between religion and spirituality. So in that sense, I've always felt there's something bigger. So I would now describe myself as panentheistic, which means there's something bigger than me. And I think spirit and source and nature is in nature, it's in everything, and it's in me. It's me and not me. But my husband, who's really pantheistic, it's all in me, and I am a part of the whole, and the whole is me, and it isn't bigger than. It's an interconnection. For me, it's an interconnection and something more. So getting a bit theological and theological there. I'm exploring goddess spirituality at the moment. I'm trained as a priestess for 5 years now. And the embodied nature for women to envisage the divine as female can be really liberating. It's in my body, it's in the land, it's in my blood mysteries, it's who I am, it's in my femaleness. Whereas, like me, if you come in through patriarchal religions, for a very long time, woman is always, female is the temptress, the seductress, the not quite as good as. So for me, goddess spirituality and its feminist roots as well in Western society is a disruptive act. It's a feminist disruptive act, and of course, goddess in India and in other countries has stayed as part of the traditions much more so. Yeah. So I can talk for, I love all of this stuff.
I know, and I'm just like, oh, there's so many little things coming out of what you're saying. I'm like, oh, that. So I'm sort of letting all of that excitement be here, and yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just share a little bit about my own growing up. I was raised as a Catholic in rural Ireland in the 80s, and it was sort of pre the Celtic Tiger. So, it was a remote lifestyle, really. If you lived in the countryside, you spent all your time in the countryside. And definitely had a feeling in relationship to my body that it would be better if we didn't have a body, really, especially a female body. And there was a very clear moment. I even remember the piece of clothing that I had this lime green lycra bodysuit with sort of rings around the top. And I just loved this. I was about 11, 12. It was like my last year of primary school. And my body was changing. And I just loved it. I felt so alive and in my skin, and really like, oh, my body is changing, and completely at one with the shape of it. And even then, I mean, I probably wouldn't have been able to describe it or put it into words, but I could sense the shift in the adults around me.
Yeah.
And it's mostly fear. If I went and named it now, there's a kind of a fear of the female body as it comes into a more mature form that is going to mean all of those things that you've just described. And I think as a teenager, apart from the middle years of the intense hormone shifts, which were really challenging, once I got to about 16, I just felt this feeling again of just lusciousness in my own skin and my own shape and my own fleshness. And I sort of knew that I needed to sometimes hide that a little bit from, even my own direct family, because they just didn't know what to do with it almost.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's reflected for many women.
Yeah.
My story is I When I was 10, I had to wear a 34-inch bra. I was matured. I looked about 40, I was about 17 or 18. And in primary school, in the last year of primary school, I started to menstruate, and the boys would make fun of me, and they would watch my boobs as I ran around the playground, and noticing. So I got this thing of very much having to keep my body in check, not to have it ridiculed really or mocked, because we were 10, we were 11, and I was walking around the school, looking like a 17, 18-year-old, because I developed early in those ways, like other girls do. Some girls do,
Mm.
yes.
What helped you to stay open and growing? Then you're aware of this kind of conditioning, this culture around you, and when I listen to your voice, I feel like clarity in myself. I feel assertiveness in myself. I can feel those things when I'm listening to you, and I wonder, has it always been like that for you, or is that something you had to learn in order to be able to adapt to the culture?
I find that a really interesting question that I've inquired. I study the Enneagram. I don't know if you know the Enneagram at
Mm,
all. And I'm
yeah.
an Enneagram 8 for people who know that, which is the assertive, confident type. I was born feeling very strong and encouraged by my parents. My parents were very loving. My dad and I would argue a lot. We had quite a feisty relationship, but they left space. There was a lot of space in my family to challenge, to have conversation, to be able to say what your truth was. And we never let the sun go down on an argument. So a lot of space to be who we were and to explore who we were, which I am deeply grateful for. When I talk to other
Mhm.
people, I realize how blessed that was. And I was born with loads of energy, lots of curiosity, um, really quite open. I remember when I was chief executive of Guildford College, people said, "Does anything scare you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it does," but you kind of feel the fear and do it anyway. You get on with it. So I think I was born with a temperament like that. And I had parents who didn't understand me, to be honest. They didn't really get me um, because of their own educational background, but they loved me and they wanted the best for me and for my brother and for my sister. And I think if you're brought up in that kind of household, it allows a level of confidence. My mum talked to us about our bodies. She talked to us about sex and sexuality. People often say to me, "I can't believe the things you and your mum talk about." And she was very open about that, and we had conversations. So home was a place of nurturing and expansion, whatever was going on outside. And they're both dead now, but I'm deeply grateful for that.
Mm. I really enjoy hearing you use this word readiness. I was born ready, or something like this. And I recognize that my youngest son is almost 6, and it's the word I've used since he was a baby. The minute he wakes up, he's ready. He has the energy. It's like a puppy energy. It's like the dog has been walking for 3 hours, lies down, and then he's ready again.
Yes.
Um, has
Yes.
there been any times in your life where that's not been available to you, or any periods where it's been otherwise?
Yeah, they have, but they're rare, and I can remember them distinctly. And so I once took a job at Hackney College in 1984, and it wore me out. I'd never been worn out before. I didn't know what it meant to not have energy. And like you say, I know if I'm tired, I go to sleep, boom, go fast asleep, wake up again, bang, 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 off again. That job wore me out. I think I was out of my depth, and it was a very toxic culture. And I had been the blue-eyed girl in my previous college, and everything had gone well. So this was the place where I first met, I can't do this. I'm not as good as I think I am. Whoa, I'm not having a good impact like I'm used to. And it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And I always say it was like medicine. It tasted horrible, but it did me good. This was the place where I had to start thinking about what I was doing and how I was doing it. And that's where I first got interested in organizational development and leadership. Because before it had just worked and I'd been quite successful, and this wasn't working. And it wore me down. I can remember not wanting to get up in the morning, not wanting to go into work, just like heavy, heavy, heavy. So I think that was something about being out of my depth and being in an environment where people weren't very nice. Some were, but on the whole, there was all sorts of games going on and politics, and I didn't understand them. So that was the first time I can say that job brought me to my knees. Yeah, and I had to really work out who I was and where I got my energy from. The only other two times that I can think of is after my dad died, which was unexpected and quick. And he was 70 and he was there and then he wasn't. Um, and that loss, so there was something about that depth of loss that poleaxed me and upset me. And then the only other time, because I'm never ill, touch wood, I'm never ill, was really it was time for me to retire. I was coming up to, I said I'd retire at 50, then it was 55, then it was 58, and I was coming up to 60 and I still hadn't retired. And I got pneumonia and I had it for 6 months and I couldn't get out of having this. And it was literally, I had no energy. I just went. And it was only when I realized I need to retire. I think this is my soul. It's like I'm going around, I'm never ill. I'm never ill. I'm never due. And I'm a terrible patient, by the way, because I don't know how to be ill. So that was, and then when I listened and just made the decision, it started to go. So those are the three times where I can honestly say I felt my life force, my life energy, that get up and go was drained. Drained. Mostly it's always there. Even when I'm hurt, even when I'm mourning, even when it's still there. Yeah.
I wonder about what you reach for or what you learned about yourself in those processes when it went. So it's uncomfortable. I don't like being ill. There's no energy, and this isn't normal for me. In that, I don't know, unknown confusion, I don't like this, I don't know this. How do you begin to move through that to something else?
In the Hackney situation, that was 1984, so I was quite young then. I went to therapy because I didn't know my way through it. It was like it was new. So I went to therapy and found that really helpful because really I was having to find out who am I if I'm not successful and it's all just happening. And I really learned to be reflective. I'd always had a level of reflexivity, but this made it even deeper. So that was the way I did that. In terms of my dad, I created an award. I can remember vividly. I created an award in my primary school, and I've been going back for the last 20 years every year to give out this award. So that was more of, I have to honor his life. I have to do something. I can remember sitting there thinking, I'm going to cry for the rest of my life, or I have to do something. I have to do something that breaks this. And it was setting up an award. And my mum, she's died now, but she would come with me. My sister comes. So we give an award in our father's name to an 11-year-old each year, which is nice. The pneumonia, it was listening to it. It was listening and saying, your head is telling you one thing. You don't want to give up this job. You still like doing it. How are you going to live without the money? A million head things are going on for me. But what is your soul saying? Your soul saying it needs to rest. It needs to stop living this kind of hectic life. And at the end of the day, what is success? I'm a kind of avid overachiever. Not because my parents wanted me to, they just loved us because we breathed. It was more an internal thing for my father, really. So then it was learning to let go and see. I think it's seeing the concepts inside your head and the things that run you that you no longer need. That for me, I do that anyway as part of my spiritual inquiry. But I think there are those times when I can't get there myself. A situation or a circumstance stops you, so that you have that kind of moment of stopping and saying, hey, what is this telling me? What do I need to learn? What might I need to do differently?
Yeah, I think back to the last 12 months and how lockdown, in our circles, both near and far, has done that on a global level, and particularly um, the struggles for lots of people have been around when I'm no longer doing that thing that so much of my identity is invested in. Who am I now? What use am I? What purpose do I have? And I see that actually as a really positive thing in terms of growth, because we really grow then. We get to look at who are we, and we are more than the roles that we have in the world. We might still do that work, and yet we're more than that, which is the doer, something like that.
Absolutely. I think we all have roles and identities that really matter to us. There's nothing wrong with them. They give us significance in the world. But as we get older, or we need, young, you can't live the second half of your life as you live the first half. Part of me could carried on working in further education forever. I've been 36 years there. I loved it, and it was giving up a love. I remember feeling, because my first husband and I divorced, and we still loved each other, but no longer right to live together. And that feeling of I still love this person, and we can't carry on as we were. And I remember saying, "Oh, leaving FE feels like my divorce. It's like I still love it, but it's not right for me or them for me to continue in it." So.
Mm,
Um, so I don't think there's anything wrong with having our identity tied up into things. It's when it no longer serves us, when
mm,
it's no longer of value to us, and
mm,
the key is to know when that's true. Yeah.
mm. So you retired, and where did you put your energy then? Because I can't imagine you've just stayed at home, doing a bit of knitting or something like
Oh,
that.
this is hilarious. The number of times I've retired. I retired after the Centre for Excellence in Leadership, and 6 months later, I'd got a 3-day-a-week job to help them out. I didn't kind of want it. And then I did that for 7 years. And then I retired again. Retirement to me means I don't get a full-time job payment, actually. No, I do feel retired in the sense that it's not like having a full-time chief exec job, which I did for 17 years. That is real heavy time commitment and what your head's occupied with is. So now I do, yeah, I've written my own course, the Goddess Luminary Wheel, which is leadership and goddess spirituality, because I taught on soul of leadership and have done spiritual leadership for a long time. I wanted to give a different angle. So I've written, and have been running that for 2 years. I've been doing it online. I've just done a feminism course. I'm on the board of the Glastonbury Town Deal, where hopefully we're going to get this 25 million to spend in Glastonbury. And I'm a coach. Most of my time is as a coach with charities, teams and charities. And I write papers for charities, not academic. I don't ever want to have to write an academic paper again after my doctorate. But I do what I want to do. I'm training as a priestess. I'm volunteer in the goddess community. I help out where I can. I love working with charities, and I feel retired. There's a slowness. I go a lot on retreats. There's a slowness to my life that I never had before. Other people, to them, it's still fast and too busy, but it isn't for me.
Mm. I
It's
love hearing that differentiation. I suppose it's one of my inquiries with this podcast is I have the life force that is no effort. I wake up in the morning and I'm ready and I'm going and I'm doing this, da, 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 da. And a lot of friends, I'll have projections of I do too much, I'm too busy, I'm trying to hide something. And I really
yeah,
question that. And I'm like, am I? I'm like, no, I thrive in busyness. It really it makes me alive, and I kind of think of like a dynamo where the energy comes in and it goes out, and it's only when I stop I've got to adjust the rhythm or something like that, but that there is a kind of a cycle to it. And so I wonder, what do you do in terms of your own practices, or you mentioned writing, to really support that energy coming in as well as being able to give out?
Yeah. I have always had some kind of spiritual practice, both individually. I remember the first time I tried to meditate. I remember, oh gosh, when was that? That was when I was living in London. And I remember sitting on the stool and thinking, right, that must have been an hour, that must have been... And I remember looking at my watch and it was like 2 minutes. I've never forgotten that moment. It's like, oh, I don't think I can do this. And then it's like, right, Lynn, because that's me as well. Right, don't think you can do this. Let's see, rather than run away from it. And now I go on retreats where we're in silence, for hours and hours at an end, and presencing. So I've always had a practice. I presence now rather than meditate. It's more like being in the body and sensing the body. I'm usually in some kind of spiritual community where we have ceremonies, singing, chanting, worship of some kind. I love devotional singing. So there's a lot of different things that I enjoy doing that are natural to me. It's like I can't imagine having a day where I haven't listened to chanting or spent time, whether it's presencing or meditating or journeying, walking in the garden where I have a labyrinth. We've actually built a chamomile labyrinth in the back garden to walk. I love labyrinths. We have a garden that was designed with meditation spaces to be a kind of spiritual meditative garden. So lots of ways is integral. I love altars. I live in a chapel, my whole house like full of altars. So in that sense, I'm constantly finding ways to connect, to feel the source, the energy, however you want to call it, and to be in that presence and that stillness as well. Yeah. And without that, I think at my age now, I'm 65, I think I would suffer more than I do from having lower energy. It's there as a source of nourishment. It's, as you say, it's energy in, energy out, and it's a cycle. Because I think the source, the love, the energy, call it what you like, is always there. The question is, how much can we tune into it and be with it and be of it?
Yeah, I recognize that too in my own experience, and my own capacity to block it or hide it, that actually all the effort goes into diminishing it in a sense, through whatever, my fear or whatever,
Yeah.
because it is always here. I am always here. It is. And if there's no effort in it actually in presence, because I am it. It's simple as that. But the mental games
Yeah.
to come out of that. So I know you've got a book coming out this year. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is? And then I'd love to, I know you write poetry as well, so I'd love to hear some poetry if you wanted to share that.
Yeah, well, I've never wanted to write a book. I've had three poetry publications for poetry. I've never wanted to write a book, but what's happened to me is I developed this Goddess Luminary wheel. I've run 2 1 year of the first year, 2 spiral 1s and a spiral 2. So I've run it through with 30, 40 students. And then I did some online where 40 people from all over the world came onto it. And I thought, oh, there's a real interest in this, because it really flowed through me. I mean, I had to work to put it together, but it was a mix of it came through me, and I was using all my professional expertise to piece it together as an educational experience. And so that's made me think, oh, I'm going to write the book. So I am. I've written my first 80,000 words. I'm kind of going through it all now. whether it's just a book that, and it's a workbook and it's a mix. So, and I want it all in color and everything. So I'm kind of looking at that. So I want it ready for the next spiral, which starts in November. So I'd like it to come out probably perhaps August or around then, ready for September. Yeah. And I've got a couple of people in universities who would use it as part of their leadership program as well. So, from edgy leadership, the different kinds of leadership. So I think, yeah.
Great. I look forward
I'm
to.
doing it because I want to.
Yeah, I mean, what a joy. And the receiving of books that are written like that is just joyful as well. They kind of feel that spirit coming through. And what about your poetry? How do you write? When do you write? And would you like to share some?
Yeah, if you want me to. I won't, not too many. I've always written poetry, but I always hid it. I always hid it. And then what happened, when I was thinking of retiring, one of the things was, I'll put my poems together and see, and I did. I found Jay Ramsey, he died last year, but he was a poetry coach. So I went to him with a great big pile of poems and said, I don't know, you like this, I don't know if I'm Emily Dickinson or if this is just a load of sort of splurgy therapeutic rubbish that's of no interest to anybody, because I haven't got a clue really. And it was lovely. He said, he looked through them and he said, well, I'll publish you. Yeah.
Wow.
So my first one was, so what he did was gave me the confidence, and he coached me and helped me to be more crafty and technical, but to keep the spirit going through. And it's been pouring through me ever since, really. What I'd like to do, my first poetry collection is called Enlivenment, which is interesting because it's the very theme you're talking about. So I'm just going to read an extract from from Enlivenment. This poetry, it's got different things in, but there was a section where I'm trying to describe what it feels like, how this life force feels differently. Yeah. So Enlivenment, which I've called Holy Truth. The form in which I lived that never was, but seemed so real, dissolving into truer form of universal life force, rippling waves pulsating in my body form, reminder of true nature, I am this. Every cell enlivened, inside out and outside in, that two that never were apart live now as one, relaxing, unfolding, being here now, every moment fresh, alive, and true. So I was trying to describe how my whole body gets enlivened. And then I tried to describe joy, and the peace and the exhilaration of joy, which I experience as yellow. Breathing and suffused in yellow light. Formless form arises, cradling me, singing a lullaby of peace, my spirit released. Expanding spaciousness of soul, ecstatic transcending, beyond all limits now, soaring free, essence of joy, exquisite taste, sipping formless gratitude, suffusing every cell, all longing gone, my heart's desire fulfilled through grace. Trying to share what it's like to be in those states. And then I'd just like to end with one from a kind of goddess. There was a period where goddess poetry was pouring through me. It still does, but this was a particular time, and I've got a book, Healing Through the Goddess. And I think this is more what you were talking about, is the embodiment. Yeah. So it's called Breath of Life song, because if you think our breath is what literally keeps us alive. Breath of Life song. With your breath, you fill my body. I feel you dancing through my flesh, gifting me vitality, everything new and fresh. Breathing in the goddess, breathing in her love, breathing in her sacred air below, around, above. With your breath, you fill the ethers. I fly your soaring clouds and mist, gifting me vitality. By you, my soul is kissed.
Wow. I'm going to say something to kind of come in, but um, when I heard by the time you went into the second poem, my state is really shifted. The openness is here, the expansion outside my body, and the stillness coming inside. Heart is open. And then hearing that breath of the goddess, it's just like, I feel, gosh, what is that? Like the first breath and the eternal breath in me. It's like that is always coming, that is always filling. So thank you for that experience. I know the goddess in this way as well. And something, because my work is somatic, and a lot of that is about coming into embodied states and then finding ways to language it, because the language, in a way, I worked with a percussionist once, Nick Twilley, and he described it as language being like shining a light into the darkness. So I can be in the darkness and I'm in this state and I don't know the words, but when I can find words, it's like, there it is, that the consciousness then is there. And so I experience body like that. So it's unconscious, we bring in, and the language helps to bring it to light. And there's something about language that can be, we can describe through the words that will sort of come around and invoke it. Or, I mean, I'm moving my hands around now because it's a sort of, it's not like drawing in lines, it's a kind of a shaping in the experience of it. And then sometimes we can find words that really are very precise, and it's like, yes, that is the experience.
That's absolutely why I write poetry. It's usually spiritual stroke mystical poetry. It's usually exactly what I've never heard anybody describe it as well as exactly how I understand it. It's bringing that experience into some form of words that expresses it. Yeah, that's exactly what it is for me. I don't write funny poetry or comic work.
Yeah.
It's about state, really.
Yeah.
Every single poem, but most of it is, yeah. And it's a sacred act to me to do that. It's like a sacramental act. And when that poem is formed to the point that I can leave it, don't have to change it anymore. And sometimes it comes through and you think, oh yeah, that's it. And sometimes a bit of crafting. That point of when it's done and expressed is a sacred space for me. It feels very, very powerful to me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of something that the poet Joy Harjo talks about with poems as being, houses for spirits. And if she can get the words just right, maybe the spirit will come and live in it and enliven it. It's the magical act that we create spells, in a way, spelling through words, and the words themselves hold a vibration or something that is transmitted to the one who's listening or reading. And for me, hearing your voice, actually, that's really important in my practice. I think whenever I write, it's like, then I speak it, because then it's in my body and my voice and on my breath and in my cells. And it's very direct, that transmission.
Absolutely. I also put that down to my Welsh blood and Dylan Thomas. And my poetry is written to be spoken.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got one last question before we finish, and it's being nosy, really. But you mentioned when you started writing, you used to hide it, and now you're publishing it and you're speaking it. And I just wonder if you could just hold those two moments together of the Lynn who hid her poetry for whatever reasons, and the one who now publishes and shares it. And I don't know, not necessarily to describe it, but something about holding the two.
Oh, it was such a profound moment for me. Jay said, I'll publish you, go away, come back with 30 poems that you would like to put in a collection, etc. And when I came to him with them, I had to do a couple of sessions with him about being able to put it out in the world, because I said to him, I don't think I can. And the analogy I used is like, it's like my poetry is a delicate bird's egg, a beautiful, and I hand it out to somebody and they'll just go like that. They'll splat it and I can't bear it. So there was a vulnerability. And I did say, oh, I've spoken in front of 1,000 people. I can do all sorts of things, but to put my poetry out is something else. And I think that's about the Lynn who had a role, successful, got a CBE, was on Debrett's 500, whatever, UK Woman of Spirit, really quite a very conventional, successful life. And then putting my soul out there through my poetry was a very, very, and the first time I did a poetry reading, I was shaking from head to foot. So thank you for reminding me of that. It was more difficult for me to publish my poems and to speak them than it is to go and talk in front of 1,000 people about something, because I'm putting my soul out there. That's a part of me that I didn't normally bring into the public sphere. So I think that we're back to that. What's the role and what's all of me? All of me, and the most precious, delicate part of me, and how that's being shared in the world. And what I do know is most people want to bring their whole selves to everything that they do. And that is part of my work for myself, and also part of what I help other people to do.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lynn. I'm so delighted there are people who are ready to help others as well, because I think people really know this experience of not being able to be in their fullness, of the risks of that. So it's great to hear from you, having made that journey and now supporting others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a delight to meet you, and this exchange was exquisite. Thank you. Beautiful.
Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel